Chapter 242. The attendants' faces were hardened. Avoiding each other's gaze, hesitant, they only stared at the ground. The one who broke the uncomfortable silence was Melbourne, the only one among the three attendants who had yet to speak a word of defiance to Prince Ajane. If you truly believe there is no traitor among us, there is no reason to hesitate. At his quiet voice, the other two attendants looked at him. We all swore to die for the prince if need be. That's why we came here. No matter what the prince does, he must return to Nolan safely. And for that, we need their help. So, it's time to prove our loyalty. Melbourne reached into his pocket and pulled out a badge. The emblem was etched into a cloudy, milk-like gemstone, which at first glance looked similar to an accessory typically worn on a belt. Edith noticed that the hand Melbourne used to hold the token was slightly trembling. It was impossible to tell if the trembling was simply due to nervousness or if there was some other reason behind it. Once Melbourne took out his badge, the other attendants hesitated for a moment before doing the same. Kana accepted the badge from the attendant who was on the far left. He was the one who had been defying Ajane's orders all this time, his face still clouded with doubt. What are you going to do with these? We are going to read the information embedded within. Reading the information? What does that mean? Kana didn't explain further. Instead, she closed her eyes while clenching the badge in both hands. After a moment, Yudhir noticed a faint flowing energy radiating from inside her hands. As the energy, which looked like a heat haze, grew stronger, so did the strength Kana put into her grip. Her eyelids fluttered. A moment later, Kana opened her eyes. A complex emotion briefly flickered between her furrowed brows. This badge, it's a token from the second prince, isn't it? Yes, it is. I received it on the day I was chosen as the prince's personal attendant. The attendant stuttered out the answer. So, it's something you shouldn't pass to someone else, right? Isn't that obvious? Anyone could guess that. Then, why did you hand over such an important badge to someone? What? Kana's sharp blue eyes pierced the attendant's face. The pale attendant gulped, blinking rapidly. I don't know what you're talking about. I have never done that. You did. You gave it away, and in return, you received something. Something written on a piece of paper. Now, look here. It seems like you're making things up, saying that you're reading information. I'm not such an easy fool to fall for that. If you want to find the traitor, use a more credible method. The night before you left for the Empire, on a full moon night, at the end of the western corridor of the Balu Palace, in front of the blind sage's statue, the land of Museti. Are you still going to say you don't remember? The attendant, who was about to shout to silence Kana, froze at her falling words. How? He was gasping for breath, his mouth agape. How did you know? He stayed in disbelief at Kana, Prince Ajane, and his fellow attendants. Who told the Empire? Who is it? Who's trying to trap me? He seemed to believe that Kana had not read the information, but that someone had informed her about him. Cold sweat streamed down over the wide open eyelids of the man who was frantically insisting on his innocence. Your Highness, it's not me. Don't trust the words of this imperial agent. I am. Museti was one of the regions where the next administrator had not yet been determined. Prince Ajane, who had been sitting with his body turned away from them, opened his mouth quietly. So, they told you they would give you the land if you betrayed me, Jen? No, Your Highness. The attendant Jen shouted out straight away and shook his head. They did call me through Kindy the day before we left for the Empire, but as soon as I saw who was there, I immediately left without listening to a word. I'm innocent. Then, who is Dela? Who is Dela? However, Jen's outcry was soon halted by Kana's words that were heard again. While he remained silent, Prince Ajin responded slowly. It's the name of Jen's wife, if my memory serves me right. Ah. Shivering, Jen alternately looked at Jane and Kana. Kana closed her lips tightly, then sighed and opened her mouth. She also borrowed this emblem. The reason was to postpone your gambling debts in your stead with this emblem. You wanted to hide that, and it wasn't a very old event, isn't it? She said the prince would never help with such a disgraceful matter. Kana's direct gaze targeted Jen, who was retreating awkwardly with a pale face. Do you also deny this? Your Highness. Jen, the attendant, covered his face and knelt. I said once would be enough. I was only asked to inform about who would accompany Your Highness before you left, but I was never involved in this incident. That's the truth. Please believe me. In the end, he crumbled. His voice, filled with fear, flowed out in a confused manner. As Prince Ajane silently watched him, Kishir swiftly signaled to Eman. Eman, you said it's possible to temporarily trap a target other than yourself in darkness, right? Yes, I will trap him. Quickly picking up on Kishir's intention, Emun reached out his hand. Then, from above Jen's head, a darkness like a falling veil covered him, swallowing even the screams he was making. Everyone stayed silent as they observed the entity now concealed in darkness, invisible and inaudible, unable to recognize one another. After a moment, Prince Ajin cleared his throat and spoke. When you mentioned the ability to read information, I doubted it, but I didn't expect you to find it so quickly. Truly an impressive ability. I'm sorry, Second Prince, but the readings are still in progress. Kishir responded without a change in expression. We were lucky that the first person turned out to be the traitor, but whether it was only that one time or from the very beginning, no one knows. We haven't forgotten his words just now, have you? The first attendant, Jen, claimed that while it was true he had betrayed them, he had never given any information that could lead to an assassin. If this was true, it meant there could very well be more traitors. Of course, if you believe it to be enough, Prince, the cavalry will not move further. Upon hearing the cold statement, Prince Ajane's eyes darkened. Various emotions flitted across his painfully neutral expression. But in the end, the prince made one choice. Yes, you are correct, Commander. I am embarrassed by my haste. I will continue to rely on your guidance. Understood. Kana, proceed. The atmosphere among the remaining two servants grew even heavier. Kana, too, seemingly feeling a strong sense of burden, exhaled softly. She glanced between the two servants, then reached out her hand to the servant standing closer to Melbourne. He hesitated momentarily, but then wordlessly placed his symbol into her hand. Kana used her powers in the same manner as before. As she read the information, her furrowed face heated up, beads of sweat forming. After a moment, she opened her eyes, her gaze shifting to the second servant. For some unknown reason, he merely kept his eyes lowered, looking at the floor. Kana, watching his face, bit her lip, turning her head towards Melbourne to speak. I apologize, but before I speak about the information I read from his token, May I also read the one from the person next to you? What kind of information could she have read from the second token to make such a request? Someone unable to bear the tension swallowed dryly. Please do so. Melbourne handed his own token to Kana. A current of power, like a swirl of mist, shot wildly out of Kana's hand. Now holding the third token, her small hand shivered uncontrollably under the pressure, her eyelashes trembling. A moment later, as the power finally faded, Kana drew in ragged breaths. Her blue eyes, revealed beneath her eyelids, flickered with an indiscernible emotion. She looked at Prince Ajane, who was currently avoiding her gaze, and then bowed her head toward Kishir. I have finished reading, Commander. So, what did you learn? Kana unusually hesitated for a moment, but she did not stop her answer. Each of the servants present here, for some reason, had passed on your information to others. A terrifying silence followed. All doubted their ears at the unexpected answer. The servants, too, couldn't utter a word. Is that true? Kishir, also seeming to think the result shocking, unusually reconfirmed the answer. Kana nodded firmly. Yes. Her gaze shifted to the second servant. He had already given up before he gave me his symbol, so it would be better for him to speak directly. There really is nothing we can hide. The second servant, as if resigned, clenched his fist tightly. But when everyone's gaze turned towards him, he immediately knelt before Ajane. I, Fati, have served you for a long time, Prince, and there was never a moment when I was not proud. Then why? Ajane quietly asked, avoiding the servant's gaze. Why did you betray me? It wasn't betrayal. I only thought that if the direction of your path you were taking was wrong, I should correct it for you. The servant answered, tears streaming down his face. How could you possibly think of borrowing the power of the Empire, Prince? Even if you deemed it necessary, you could never truly raise Nalan upright through that method. You, of all people, should not have done so. So, you handed over my information? I didn't wish for your highness to be endangered. I thought if you met those who would moderately hinder you and failed, you would return to the right path. The appearance of the monster was an unexpected event, but now that things have come to this, I have nothing more to say. At a glance, his gaze still seemed to be filled with loyalty, yet the cold emotions hiding within were of a stubbornness and anger of a man who had failed to manipulate his lord to his own will. Prince Ajane closed his eyes as if in pain. I always valued your audacity, and you kept by my side. I explained the necessity of this journey to the Empire several times, and I thought everyone had accepted it. But this is how it's repaid? Haven't I also repeatedly advised you out of loyalty? Dealing with the Empire is a dangerous proposition. If you had decided to face the other princes directly like before, I wouldn't have had to go to these lengths. And what of the innocent people of Nalan? Prince Ajane countered with a dry voice. What about our citizens, exhausted from years of border conflicts and unstable politics? We have lost even the strength to fight. Knowing there's another way, should we sacrifice their lives for a meaningless battle among princes? Is that what you believe is right? At this point, isn't whatever I add just the hollow rambling of a traitor? The servant who had revealed his name as Fati hunched over and let out a laugh. Having failed like this, I will not have the honor of serving you again. Please, may you live a long and healthy life. The bored servant seemed to tremble, overwhelmed by emotion. At that moment, Priest Lusan, who had been quietly observing the situation from afar, seemed to realize something and abruptly stood up and exclaimed, "Hold on, something is off. This person?" But soon before Lusan could finish his sentence, the servant coughed up dark blood and collapsed. "He swallowed poison. Quickly, turn him over." But by the time those around him rushed to turn him over, he had already breathed his last.